Hello, I'm Terry Muir, and I'll be your host today. And all of us here at Sustainable Kashi are proud to provide these free classes for you every week to help connect us with our ecosystem and each other. Feel free to learn more about our project at sustainablekashi.com. Today, I'm really excited because we're talking about developing a regenerative future. Today, I get the pleasure of introducing Tony and Ximena Cho. Tony Cho is the co-founder of ChoZen Retreat. He's a social impact entrepreneur, a real estate investor, developer, and the founder and chairman of Metro One, which is a forward-thinking, full-service real estate investment brokerage, management, and development firm focused on shaping neighborhoods and developing sustainable cities. So we kind of brought in some experts in this field today. Ximena Cho is a philanthropist, environmental advocate. She's the co-founder of ChoZen Retreat and the ChoZen Path, which is a communal platform for conscious, intentional living. We're very blessed to have Tony and Ximena on the call today. Thank you for joining us to share your insights into building this regenerative future.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Sustainable Kashi. Thank you, Amy, Priya. We're honored to be here. We see a lot of people from our Kashi community, which is where I was born and raised by my grandmother, Ma Jayasati Bhagavati, in a beautiful, intentional, interfaith community that's directly adjacent to ChoZen Retreat and is the reason that we are here and happy to have escaped from the urban madness, which I'm so passionate about. Being here in nature has really transformed our lives, and I think that's really a blessing for all of us. And we're going to share some of the lessons that we've learned and the things that we're thinking about. And really, this is a co-creative process. So we're here to learn from each and every one of you and to share our experiences. And really, this is all about co-designing kind of our regenerative futures together. And when talking about regenerative development, we really have to understand, what does regenerative development actually mean? Because it's such a nuanced kind of new emergent field. And really, there's sustainable development, which I think we're really kind of moving past that, because we just can't sustain ourselves. That's not actually sustainable. And then beyond sustainability is resilience. We all talk about resiliency and, pandemic resilience and climate resilience and being able to deal with, storms and hurricanes and surges and things like that. But regenerative development goes the next step farther, and it basically creates these circular systems that actually create regenerative systems that are actually better than how we found them. And that's really, it's a co-evolutionary process. And some of it's very academic. I come from, the school of hard knocks, of learning things on the streets and really rolling up your sleeves and dealing with communities and creating communities and, doing a lot of service work, which I think is really important about it. But I think at the end of the day, regenerative development first starts with each of us working on ourselves. So it's the inner work that needs to happen. And I think that's the beauty of communities like Kashi and other intentional communities, because community has always been at the core of everything that I've done. And I really, learned a lot of that from, being raised in community. And believe me, it's not all a walk in the park. It's not as easy. It's very romantic now, intentional communities. And a lot of people on this call can tell you that there are big challenges of sharing a shower with 20 people. And, there's a lot of compromise and sacrifice. But I think that where we've gotten to today in the current state of affairs, with all this division and all this hate, I think it starts with the inner work with ourselves. And, that's what we've been working on, particularly since the start of the pandemic, and has really helped us grow and emerge in this field that we're so passionate about. And I think to that point, I'd like to invite Ximena, my partner, my soulmate, my inspiration, the divine feminine to lead us in kind of a moment of awareness or meditation or whatever you want to call it. I think that's a big part of the healing that needs to happen. So.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being on the call and for inviting us, Terry and Amy, to be part of this amazing work that you do by sharing your wisdom and teaching us all how to take care of Mother Earth. So thank you for making us a part of that. And my offering today would be a prayer in the form of a meditation that I would like us all to sink into right now so we can start our program today. So I would like to ask everyone to please close your eyes and get in a comfortable seated position. Relax your shoulders, relax your neck, and take a deep breath. Now, I would like each one of you to imagine that you are a seed that has a beautiful purpose on this earth. Now, it's up to you. What would you like to be? Are you going to grow to be a tree, a beautiful, strong tree that will provide a home and shade and food for other living beings? Will you be a flower that will feed the birds and the bees and make everything beautiful and provide the scent to give everyone a beautiful feeling? Are you going to grow up to be a vegetable that will feed other living beings, that will feed humans and keep them alive on this planet? Whatever you decide to grow up to be, your purpose on this life after you grow up from being a seed is precious. So we will start this journey as a seed. Inside of this soil, you will look around and smell the beautiful moist from this soil. See all the little beings, all the little worms that are ushering your journey up towards the light. And then slowly you will begin to grow your roots down to the core, to the center of Mother Earth. The roots that are in search for water that will provide the source of strength and nutrition to start us up on this journey up towards the light. So you spread your roots, take strong hold, and begin your journey through the soil. Heading up, and up you go until you reach the surface. And now you see the light. You reach out towards the energy of this precious source that is our Father Sun. The energy that will give us the life, the strength to grow, to provide food or a home for many other living beings. So we grow and grow and grow and find our purpose. Are we feeding all the little animals? Are we being a beautiful tree that's providing home to many animals, that's providing shade for humans and other living beings? You start extending your strong trunks and your strong leaves and start growing your fruits or your beautiful petals. And you are in this cycle of life, providing nutrition, life, a home to other living beings. And once your mission is accomplished, you continue on the cycle of life and start the process of decomposition towards your way back to the soil, back to the earth. That is where everything begins and ends in our physical form. So now that you've returned back to the soil, you understand how everything is connected, how important you as a seed, as a plant, as a tree, as a flower, as a vegetable are precious to our existence on this planet. And without that source, that is the soil, this precious gold that is the soil, there would be none of these plants or trees, and we would have a barren earth. So our prayer with this process that we've just encountered is that this precious soil is taken care of, that our existence on this planet as humans, that we have the consciousness to understand that the most important thing in the cycle of life is this soil, because without taking care of it, loving it, and treating it with the utmost honor and respect, we would not have the magical experience that it is to be alive on this planet Earth. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you for setting beautiful, beautiful space for us to truly blossom here. And with that, I'd love, Tony, please tell us about some of the projects you're working on. I happen to know that you just got Indian River County's largest Tesla solar powered roof, which I am really interested in. And it is truly a marvel to see. I believe, is it the largest in the county or the state of Florida?
As far as I know, it's the largest by kilowatts in the state of Florida, maybe in the southeastern United States. The 44 kW system was 80 panels. It was truly an impressive feat that I saw. It was technology and engineering coming together with aesthetic beauty. And I my hat's off to Tesla and Elon for disrupting yet another industry. And he's working on another aspect of this, which would be the Tesla HVAC system. Because if you guys may understand, HVAC, heating and cooling, accounts for the majority of our energy usage, about 30%. So with the automobile industry now being electrified, the roofs now being electrified, and our HVAC system being made more efficient, we start to get to efficient homes where we can actually have some of the modern conveniences and luxuries and be sustainable and regenerative. And that's really what, why we went for it. Even though it's a little bit experimental, this is version 3 of the Tesla solar roofs. I feel like our role is to inspire people and educate them and show them that it's possible. It wasn't much more expensive than replacing the roof and getting solar panels. Plus there was a 26% tax credit, which was just extended for another 2 years. And I'm very optimistic and hopeful that with the new administration coming in with their green building initiative, that there's going to be a lot more further investment into clean energy, and that there's going to be a lot more further incentives for homeowners to leverage this. And in my professional life, my goal is to really help steward, and bring this awareness and education to more underserved communities, and really being able to find solutions for them, in smart homes and well homes that have IoT and artificial intelligence integrated, so they can have access to telemedicine and other things that are coming down the pipe, and integrate into these homes, whether they're tiny homes or compact housing or what the case may be, home in a box that's fully sustainable, off grid or net zero or something to that degree. And that's what all of our projects I consider living laboratories, whether it's Wynwood Arts District or Magic City Innovation District or ChoZen Retreat or Kashi, and what you guys are doing with Sustainable Kashi. These are laboratories where we can experiment and prototype new ideas around sustainability and community and technology, which I'm super passionate about. So what I'm going to do is share a presentation that I did in Berlin at the Tech Open Air Conference, which is a technology conference. So when asked to think about, the cities of the future, one of the things that, as a kid, I always thought about was the Wizard of Oz, and Emerald City. And to me, the Emerald City is an emblem of what the future of cities could look like. Now, every place is unique and different, and everybody has a different idea of what their community or their neighborhood or their city should look like. But I think, imagining and showing, ideas can really be helpful in helping to co-design these cities of the future. So here's a quote from Ma Yan-song, that's an architect from China. The city of the future will be shifted from the pursuit of material civilization to the pursuit of nature. This is what happens after human beings experience industrial civilization at the expense of the natural environment. And so biophilia and biomimicry is very emergent in the field of urban development. And that's something that we're very passionate about as well, is really mimicking nature as systems for designing civilization, designing what we call the built environment. And the built environment is every square foot under air that exists on the planet. And there are many different forecasts, but over the next 30 years, it's forecast that the built environment will double or triple in size. And if that happens, then we have a lot of bigger challenges than we have today. If we continue to develop the way that we've developed the last 100 or 200 years, using these archaic building methodologies and materials that are not sustainable, we're going to have even bigger problems than we have today. So, all these answers lie within nature. I'm going to share, many of you know my journey, so I'm going to share just a little bit. And there's a number of people here from the Kashi community, but I was born at Kashi Ashram in Sebastian, which is where Terry and Amy have Sustainable Kashi, and where Swami Durgadas is, and a number of you from the community. That was founded by my grandmother in 1974. And it was a beautiful experience growing up in community that wasn't without its challenges and growing pains, but really was something that has informed all of my professional and personal decisions in my life. And actually, it's the reason that one of the main reasons Ximena and I connected, because she was on her way to go to the ashram when we reconnected and didn't know about my background, and was on her spiritual journey and practicing yoga. And so Ma played a very important role. She married us 4 months before she passed away, and so very, very important connection there. And then from the ashram, I went to school for a brief period and ended up in Buenos Aires doing an exchange program. I fell in love with Buenos Aires at the time. It was an era when the peso and the dollar were 1-to-1, and it was kind of the heyday of Argentina. And I had my worldly experience and was traveling all around South America and was exposed to some beautiful culture and beautiful experiences. And I decided that I wanted to move there and drop out of school. And I was eating meat at the time, which was, not very appreciated by my grandmother. And so she cut me off financially at that moment, which was actually the best thing that happened to me, because I had to put my big boy pants on and figure out how to survive. And being self-sufficient was very important to me. And So I ended up getting a job in nightlife in what probably the most happening lounge restaurant in Buenos Aires. And the first night I'm working there, Madonna and the president come in as my first guests. And so I got to meet a lot of amazing people in Latin America and around the globe. And that kind of started my career in nightlife and hospitality. And I enjoyed being a host and taking care of people. In a way, it was an extension of service, obviously to a different clientele and a different environment, but was also equally inspiring for me. I was 19 years old and I traveled all over and went skiing for the first time in Bariloche and went to Punta del Este and Carnival in Brazil. And so it was a real magical coming of age experience for me. And then I came back to Miami and continued in nightlife and started getting involved in real estate. And originally I thought I would be, with my contacts, a realtor to the stars and, sell expensive homes, which I quickly grew bored of because it wasn't creative or inspiring. And I had invested in an apartment near where the Performing Arts Center in Miami was to be announced and built. And I had saved $9,000 from the nightlife. And I borrowed a high interest rate, loan shark money from a guy in Hialeah that I'll never forget, to buy this apartment for $60,000. And then the Performing Arts Center was announced, and a year later I sold that apartment for $180,000. And that was kind of my aha moment about how art and culture impact real estate values, both in a positive and a negative way, right? At the time, being a kid that didn't really, or being a teenager, didn't really know the negative consequences of gentrification and cultural misappropriation, I thought it was all fine and dandy. And over the years, I've come to learn a lot about how real estate values have negatively impacted disproportionately underserved communities, Black and Brown communities in particular. So that was kind of an aha moment. And from there, I got into, very involved in the arts district, Wynwood in Miami, which we can show some photos of, which was a magical ride of, at one point we had 90 art galleries, and we had a Wynwood Arts District Association, and we were bringing street artists from around the world to paint the town, so to speak. And it caught the attention of a lot of people around the world and became one of the most highly recognized arts districts in the world that a lot of people have emulated and copied. And then it went through its process as well, and we created the Wynwood Arts District Association and the Wynwood BID, the Business Improvement District, which is a common tool for creating amazing places and placemaking. And we rezoned the neighborhood in a very sustainably oriented way, reducing parking requirements and providing incentives for artists and creatives. And it garnered a lot of awards from an urban planning standpoint. And we kept the scale low. We incentivized people to keep their warehouses and not just to go vertical and have high rises everywhere. In other parts of the city, we have buildings that were 30, 40, 50 stories high. In this district, we capped it at about 8 to 12 stories to keep it more human scale and balance it out with the warehouse typology, building typology that was there that gave its characteristics. And you've seen a lot of this happen, in New York, in Soho and Williamsburg and the Pearl District, in Seattle and Portland and other places around the world, where there's this mid-century kind of dilapidated warehouse product that, to me, I just saw as a blank canvas to create with artists whatever it was that we wanted to create. So also living laboratories. And that was an amazing experience. So, and then from there, I said, okay, this was really interesting. How do we leverage technology to really co-create these cities of the future and bring in art, culture, community, and technology to really advance us? Because to me, technology is the magic of our era. And I think there's been a divide between kind of the digital and the built environment, and how do we leverage it for humans, a human way to actually use technology and not be ruled by it. So exactly. You want to share? I don't think anybody heard.
Oh, just that for me, yes, technology is very important, to honor our brilliance as humans, but I think also ancient technologies, it's really kind of part of these regenerative futures that we're all aiming at, right? So yeah, learning about the practices of our ancestors, our indigenous communities, and the way that they used to do it when things were a lot more simple. I think there is a lot to learn there.
Yeah, definitely the ancient technologies intersecting with current and future technologies is something that we're passionate about. And I think in many indigenous communities, there's this planning methodology called 7 generations, where they plan for the 3 generations before them and the 3 generations ahead of us and the present generation, which is not something that happens in traditional urban planning or development in cities. And so I'm trying to incorporate as much of these lessons, around the story of place. And regenerative development actually means going into an area and looking at both human and non-human stakeholders. So the rivers, the forests, the topography, what's happening, and how is a development going to impact not only the local community, but how is it going to integrate and impact the ecosystem that surrounds it, both locally and regionally. So placemaking is very focused on a neighborhood. And that was kind of the work that I had done, in Wynwood. And regenerative development is more of a macro regional concept that is more holistic in its approach. And again, starts with the individual's work and then starts looking at deep listening and learning. And usually this process takes a minimum of 12 to 18 months before you can build coherence and understand the history of a place and the needs of a community and the needs of the environment and the region at large. And so it's more of a macro holistic approach. And so what we're looking at prototyping and developing is what I'm calling regenerative placemaking. And that's going to be a part of our methodology for the Future of Cities platform, which is our next endeavor that we're launching, which I'll get into in a little bit. So some of the stats, how are we doing on time, Terry?
You're doing wonderful. Thank you. You got plenty of time.
Okay. So here's some stats. And can you guys all see the presentation? Okay, cool. By 2050, the United Nations estimates that the world will have 9.8 billion people, an increase of 2 billion people from the 7.8 billion people today. Migration to and overcrowding of cities. Within 30 years, 6.7 billion people will live in cities, 68% of the world's population, a 60% increase compared with that of today, which is about 51 to 52%. Now, these stats were pre-COVID. There's a number of trends that are emergent now that will kind of skew these numbers, which I hope are not permanent trends, because a lot of people are fleeing cities right now and moving to rural and suburban places, which has a whole host of negative impacts to the environment, emphasis on the automobile, suburban sprawl, elimination of biodiversity, all of these other things that come with everybody wanting a white picket fence and a green lawn and just chopping down our forests, which is not the direction that we want to go. So as an environmental activist and as a regenerative developer, I look at both conserving our biodiversity and kind of what dovetails into the half Earth movement, which is protecting half of the Earth's land into conservation with access in a way that people can experience nature but not hurt nature, and really densifying cities, or what we're calling rewilding cities, which is a really new emergent trend within regenerative development. Because most people, in order for us to have a sustainable civilization, unless we want to decrease the population, we have to live in dense urban areas. Not everybody has the luxury to live in Kashi or ChoZen retreat or Costa Rica, because if we spread out all over the globe horizontally, we'll destroy the planet. So that's not really an option unless we want to decrease the population, which I'm not really an advocate for population control. I think it's more about education. So we can get into that. Obviously, increased inequality leading to civil unrest. I think we've seen that in this latest administration with the divisiveness and the disparity and the racial tensions, and that's going to continue to happen as more people are disenfranchised and don't have a voice or a seat at the table. If we don't provide solutions for underserved communities and education, that's just going to increase. This is just the tip of the iceberg from, our vantage point. And then also the climate change refugee crisis that's coming. The UN also predicts that 1 billion people will be climate change refugees by 2050. That's 1 billion people. And mostly that's not in the United States, because the United States has the resources to relocate. People in the United States are much wealthier, even our poorest segment of the population, to up and relocate. But in Africa and Southeast Asia, for example, they don't have the same resources that we have. So that's going to be a very disruptive process that we're living in our lifetimes. In the next 30 years, we are going to see. So obviously it's overwhelming and depressing to talk about all the challenges. I think what I'm really focused on is the solutions. And we believe these challenges are surmountable, they're overcomable, but we all have to get aligned and work together. And capitalism is no longer the solution to solve for these problems. And we have to get to a post-capitalistic or a social capitalistic system that evolves, that takes into account the externalities and the damages that just a purely pursuit of profit, creates. Obviously, the damage to the environment, the social fabric damage, and all the other things that are happening with just the sole pursuit of profit. And there's a lot of theory out there around where we're going. There's systems that are being developed and thought leadership around universal basic income or universal earned income and different tools to solve these problems. Something that people need to realize with the advancements of automation and technology and robotics and AI and IoT, it's very conceivable that the majority of our jobs will disappear in the next 30 years. And with a 10 billion person population, how do people sustain themselves? How do they have the basic needs covered? And so these are real issues that we need to get in front of. We can't ignore, we can't make them partisan issue. This is not a Republican issue. This is not a Democratic issue. This is a human issue. These are real things that technology is disrupting in our lives, and we have to look at. We have to address, and I'm not saying that any of us have the answers, but really it's about having these dialogues and having these conversations and really being able to prototype these solutions. And intentional communities are a prototype. We went to Oroville in India last year, which was a prototype for the city of the future that was wanting to replicate 50,000 person cities all over the world. And they're most well known for reforesting an area in India that was very desertified, and the soil was destroyed. And it's really a beautiful, beautiful example, not without its challenges as well, like many communities have, but really a beautiful example, one example. And I think that's really something that we have to look at, is take examples from other places and open source these ideas and see what works for your community and for your neighborhood and for your city. Because I think the beauty about a city is its own flavor and its own culture. That's if it's actually effective, it's evolving all the time. It's not static. Life's not, once you become static, and that's the problem with zoning laws, is they're static and they take a long time. Like in Orlando and most cities, you couldn't grow fruit trees, you couldn't compost, and our mutual friend, Chris Castro, who's on our board, is the director of sustainability for the city of Orlando, tried to educate, the policymakers that this is not sustainable. We should be able to grow our own fruits and vegetables. We should be able to compost. Shouldn't be illegal, and it's so there's a lot of hurdles that are preventing us from being regenerative and sustainable. And there's a lack of education and coherence, among our leaders, and that really needs to change. And the things that, we're doing and that, Sustainable Kashi and others are doing are really important to educate people about the solutions they can do in their own lives. So some of the solutions that we're exploring, obviously mobility, and there's this new emergent concept of the 15-minute city, where basically your neighbor creating small neighborhood blocks within cities that eliminates cars, and you can basically get to all of your needs and your services in a city within a 15-minute walk. So Paris is prototyping this, Portland is prototyping this. This is something that's really catching fire around the world in terms of eliminating automobiles and creating kind of micro to macro transportation. Micro transportation are scooters and bicycles or last mile transportation that gets you to mass transit, which is, you know, high-speed trains, subways, buses, other things like that. But really the concept is creating a core within the city where there's no automobiles, because it's more human-centric, it's more of the communities that we want. Now, of course, what does that do? That makes those parts of the city extremely valuable. And does that really serve the underserved community, or people can't afford to live in those expensive areas? So there's many thoughts about how to fix that. You know, one of them is to really prototype these ideas within every block within the city, which is happening in Stockholm and other places. But mobility is a very big part of, as the cities grow and they densify, that we have to solve. Shared spaces, you know, the shared economy, co-working spaces, co-living spaces, living in community, kind of community-driven, developments. That's something that has been, you guys have seen on the rise all over the world. Intelligent zoning, creating symbiotic environments. Go up smartly, not out. Let's not spread out. Let's go vertical. Let's be dense, but let's do it in a way that now it's very challenging. People are scared of being in tight, closed environments in cities, but we have to make cities livable again, as I pointed out earlier. Creative reuse and adapting of obsolete space, you know, with solutions like urban agriculture and vertical farming as a case study and things like that. And a big area that I think we're going to see a lot of advancements are in new building technology and alternative building materials. Reduce waste, reduce carbon footprint and construction sites dangers, coming up with, you know, in high rises, photovoltaic integration into glass, for example, which are now super expensive. But if the government provides incentives and the private sector and foundations work together, we can advance these technologies to really have more cost-effective solutions in our built environment. And then leveraging public-private partnerships and opportunity zones, which is a much deeper conversation. But basically what this theory is, you know, these problems are too big for the world for any one sector to be able to solve them. So we have to come together as the public sector, as the private sector, as the foundation, as our faith-based organizations, and work towards these solutions. Because again, these are not political problems. These are not partisan problems. These are human problems that we have to solve.
I love that. Yeah.
I have to say, I'm amazed by your ability to scale these concepts to such global levels. But it's amazing because I can take these same concepts that you're using and introducing and just scale them down to a simple backyard garden. And it's absolutely amazing that they all share a truth between them, just the scalability. So thank you.
No, actually, it's the other way around. What you're doing on a small scale is actually what we need to bring into our, you know, and it's not even a small scale. I mean, that what you're doing is even a large scale on the community side. You know, permaculture is probably one of the most important movements of our day. You know, just the concept around minimal inputs for maximum outputs and really leveraging, you know, and understanding and listening to the land. It's the same thing when we go into a community. We need to do deep listening before we just put our ideas. I mean, it's the colonialization of, you know, Europeans that have created so much of this problem that has come into our current urban fabric, and that has persisted. So there a lot of the basic principles of permaculture are synonymous with the principles of regenerative development. And so we actually need to bring more permaculture principles into urban agriculture and into the built environment if we're going to be sustainable. So they're all equally, and everybody's got to do their part. You know, at some point, everybody should be able to produce their basic, you know, gardens and vegetables in buildings, you know, in single family homes, in communities, et cetera. And you're seeing community gardens as a tool for transformation of neighborhoods. It's happening all over the world.
Yeah, and I think, you know, seen as a small scale, like doing your own garden, just the human contact with the soil, I think is transformative. I think that act in itself can just transform consciousness and hopefully have an impact on all these bigger issues. So yeah, I think we should all have our own small little gardens.
Yeah, I think we're all disconnected so much because of the instant gratification of Uber Eats being delivered to your home within 15 minutes of pressing a button, and you don't think about what went into producing that food, to manufacture it, you know, the carbon footprint of the cars delivering it to you. It's no, we want it now, and we want it fast, and we want it immediately, and that's not part of the solution. You know, that's not going to get us there. We're all, you know, we're all responsible for this. And I will tell you some really exciting things that are happening. I mean, I can't make the announcements, but there's some of the biggest companies in the world that are now coming in and pledging to be climate neutral and climate positive much earlier than even the Paris Accord. And that's going to be announced in the next couple of months. And when those big Fortune 500 companies decide to be net zero, that's really where things are going to shift, because then others will follow, and all of their employees, and then the government will see that, and it's a big collaboration. So there's a very unique pivot point happening right now in the world where this movement is really gaining momentum and steam. And there's also a lot of darkness and challenges that we face, and that's just kind of the two sides of the story that we need to keep on fighting for. And I mean, getting back to permaculture in cities and urban farming, you know, most of the food deserts in cities are predominantly in underserved communities. And so that's something that really needs to, when we talk about the health and well-being and thriving and resilience of communities, that's where we need to focus. And I think all of our attention should not be focused on the 1%, but should really be focused on the 99% of the world that doesn't have the solutions, and we don't have the proper incentives for their basic needs to be met: education, you know, quality food, et cetera. And I think, you know, through integrating some of these practices within the cities, I think that's going to help change things and connecting people with their food. This is an interesting graphic that just shows you kind of the space that's required to transport 60 people. You look, the left slide is the car, then it's a bus, and then it's a bicycle, and just shows how the automobile, we've built our cities, you know, particularly in the United States, around the automobile industry. And that has created a lot of the problems that we have. So I think we need to also reimagine, you know, Europe existed before there were automobiles. So, you know, that's why we love their cute, beautiful neighborhoods that have their vibe, you know. And so, yeah, this is getting into kind of intelligent upzoning. And, you know, a lot of people are just not educated on these issues. They don't look at the macro issues. And so I've encountered a lot of people who are just anti-development. They want everything in Miami to stay as single family homes. And that's not really sustainable, because then you'll have to just keep on spreading out and go into the Everglades. And so I think people want to do the right thing. I think a lot of people just don't know the impacts of these decisions, or what they're fighting against, or what they're being told to believe. And there's just a lot of misinformation and fake news out there. And so I think, you know, it's important to share as much information that, you know, that's out there with people, so they can make their own best informed decisions, because there's just not a lot of good leadership.
Right, and have these type of conversations and interactions, right? So that, yeah, it's not, information is also not just coming from news sources, but we are able to just have these conversations and kind of see all points of view.
Yeah, this was 2 years ago in Minneapolis, had already voted to end single family zoning within the urban core. It's just not equitable, because then those single family homes all become $500,000 or more, and you're just wasting space that should be shared or community space or more equitable housing. This talks about think about what's going to happen in the next 30 years when we eliminate, you know, when all the cars are autonomous. Think about those billions of square meters and feet of parking garages that are going to be obsolete. What are we going to do with those things? And people are still, governments and cities are still mandating, you know, to build parking garages the way we've done it for the last 50 years, you know, and it's ridiculous. It's just completely archaic. So these are some ideas of doing, you know, hydroponics and vertical farming and kind of reinventing what exists, you know, reuse, you know, upcycle, as we call it. We went into this already, some of the building methodology, maintenance and materials, using public-private partnerships to create people, planet, profit, and purpose. You know, actually it's the 4 Ps that we're talking about, not the triple P.
I love the depth of how far you've really looked at the whole picture with our communities. And we have about 5 minutes left. So I was wondering if you were able to maybe answer a few questions that people had. Is
Yeah,
that
sure.
is that okay?
Yeah.
So Kashi wanted to know about if you added education components into the design of regenerative cities.
Absolutely. Education is probably one of the most important pillars of the platform that we're launching, Future of Cities, which is part venture fund, part real estate fund, and part thought leadership think tank. And education is one of the most important things. And I think the education industry is being disrupted by tech and now by COVID, and people are really rethinking kind of, well, what does even higher education or these universities mean anymore? Is it worth getting a degree when we're not giving people the skills that they'll need for this very uncertain future? And so education is important. And one of the things that we use as kind of a North Star is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And from a population standpoint and from a shifting to this regenerative future we're talking about, the United Nations always speaks of educating women and girls, particularly in emerging places like Africa and Asia, because they can then be empowered, to make decisions around their own bodies, what they're doing with the amount of children that they're having, and they are often the ones who are, the leaders of their communities. So I think that's really central and important.
Yes,
I
as
really,
well. Also, I feel like implementing permaculture courses as a must in every school, every education system must have these principles, and everybody needs to learn about them. So yeah,
I like to
definitely.
hear that. I really appreciate the way you've added diversity into the whole culture of the city. That's just as repeated in biomimicry, the more diverse a system is, the more resilient and the more abundant it'll be. So it's really great that you've added that into the design. We have another question about rural versus urban. Like, do you see the transportation needs different? Are they connected in the design?
So we're focused primarily on urban centers, but obviously a lot of these principles and concepts can apply to the suburbs as well. I mean, everybody having a unnatural green lawn with a bunch of ornamentals that are non-native is not part of the solution. But if they're not allowed to have a garden or do permaculture or composting within their communities, well, we've got to change those policies so that they're more progressive. So a big part of what we're doing is policy advocacy, and trying to open source and share these best practices and these emergent ideas, because again, I don't think anybody has the solutions. We certainly we don't pretend to have the solutions either. But we really want to provoke these conversations because they need to happen. And these are real challenges that we're encountering. One of the things we're seeing is what's called the exurbs, which is basically on the fringes of cities, a lot of suburban development starting to happen. And we believe that when we're talking about food supply chain, right now, everybody wants to get their fruits and vegetables. They're not focusing, immediately, regardless of what season it is, whether it's shipped from China or Asia or, Philippines or whatever. And so there's also a emergent regenerative agriculture discussion being happened where a region can supply the bulk of its own food, because a lot of studies have been done on vertical farming within cities. And so far, it's only estimated that 10 to 20% of all of our fruits and vegetables could be grown in that manner. So there still needs to be a more complex system that we're talking about. So again, I think the suburbs need to be designed in context with the overall system. So this is a systems redesign. So, again, I'm not a fan of suburban sprawl, but I think there are ideas around how to develop, in a sustainable way. And, I'll tell you, just because we're in Florida, something that's really a crisis, because of the pandemic and because of our tax climate in Florida, we have no state income tax. People are moving here in droves because they want open space, and so it's driving up the real estate prices artificially. In Miami, luxury homes have gone up 30% since the pandemic. It's New Yorkers and people from Chicago and San Francisco, all moving here. And so the big home builders like Lennar and D.H. Horton are buying up huge swaths of land in the middle of our state to build these subdivisions, which is going to eliminate all of our biodiversity, threaten, endangered species like the panther, which we need to protect. We need to establish this Florida wildlife corridor. Actually, this photo behind us is Carlton Ward, who's a Nat Geo photographer that is, promoting this concept. And we're going to be raising money for them to go to the legislature this year in Tallahassee to protect that. So people are unaware of the negative consequences of growth. People are like, yeah, it's great for business. People are moving here, people are paying more, the brokerage business is on fire. People are closing deals. And yes, it is, but is it worth the negative impacts that we're going to face a generation from now with the elimination of biodiversity? So we have to be very careful about suburban sprawl. And I think we need to look at what we have so far. We need to really plan. And so what I'm proposing and what we're talking about is people who own large, amounts of land, like the church, the Mormon church in Florida is actually the largest landowner. And Tavistock, for example, that has Lake Nona. Talk to them about, okay, if you're going to do a development, that's suburban in nature, well, we would like you to contribute 65% of your land into land conservation. And in exchange for that, we're going to give you very favorable zoning to allow you to densify and create these mini urban suburban nodes that are going to be more sustainable long term. And so those types of concepts, a single family home developer doesn't understand a lot of the things that we're talking about. And if they knew the negative impacts of the work that they were doing, they might actually care, they might actually care. So I think now's the moment to start educating these types of people who are making these big decisions.
Wow. Tony, Ximena, your insight and your breadth of perception is so vast. Thank you for sharing with us today. I truly appreciate the masculine, feminine combination you two both share, and you make such a powerful union. Thank you both for sharing so much. Can you tell us where to contact you or to read more about some of your projects?
Sure. We're on Instagram and social media. You can go to Metro One, which is more about what we've done in Miami. In the next month, we'll be launching the Future of Cities platform. So if you want to go there, futureofcities.com. Not really much information yet because we're waiting to launch the platform in the next 30 days. We'll have the website up and a series of videos that are kind of more educational videos with thought leadership. Some of that's going to be filmed here at ChoZen in the next 30 days. And we'll probably, if the powers that be allow us to go to Kashi at some moment, we might film some of that there at a distance. So yeah, exciting stuff happening. And would love to have you guys, everybody, this is more of a movement than a business. This is really, everybody needs to do their part for us to transition to this regenerative future that we're all dreaming of.
Thank you both for sharing so much of your knowledge with us. We have a few more questions for you, and we're going to take those to our Sustainable Kashi Facebook group so we can get people's questions answered. It's wonderful to have this level of expertise to ask them to. There will be a post on Facebook that will field all those questions too. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank Amy Zelt for producing the show today. It's been wonderful to make everything happen. If you feel you've gotten anything out of the call, please feel free to donate. We have a donate link right below. And this video will be uploaded and edited for the YouTube channel. And that way, please subscribe there, and it helps us out and is completely free. Next week, we're going to have a panel on resiliency with Jeff Trapani, Shanti Pierce, and Greg Noonan. We're going to be talking about resiliency in the future. So I remember when I first found sustainability, I started recycling and I started composting, and I felt like I was making a difference. But the more I walk the path, the more I realize that sustainability is not enough to truly heal our ecosystem and to reverse the damage that humanity has imposed on the planet. I feel we must use regenerative communities. The more connected and diverse our communities develop, the more resilient and abundant they will be. And with thought leaders like Tony and Ximena leading us into this great future, I'm optimistic and I'm very proud of us as humanity. So thank you all for joining us on this important topic, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
It's an honor.
Bye, everyone.